So in this video, I want to give you 3 tips to take your lead guitar playing to the next level. Hello everyone, thank you for checking out this video. If you're new around here, my name is Chris Harvey. I'm a UK based guitarist and I make films for the everyday guitar player, helping you navigate the wonderful world of guitar. So the thing that's motivated me to make this video is the fact that I was listening to a record by Sarah Jarosz called the Blue Heron Suite. It's kind of a thematic EP and it's really, really beautiful, but I just couldn't get past the guitar playing. There's just something about it that is really sympathetic to her songwriting. It's full of character and just really tasteful. And it got me thinking, who is that guitar player? So after a Google search and a quick scroll through Wikipedia, you know, that goldmine of reliable information, it seems that the guitar player is somebody called Jefferson Hamer. And I guess I sort of reaffirmed this by doing a search on YouTube, and I found a couple of performances of Sarah playing this song with Jefferson on guitar. Not a guitar player that I've come across before, but just one that I thought I would share with you guys, because as you may know, if you've been viewing this channel for quite a while now, that I'm a big fan of the sort of unsung, slightly undiscovered guitarist. So go and check out that EP, I'll leave a link for it in the description below, and specifically go and check out the song Morning because I love the guitar solo on that. It just sounds absolutely awesome. And I'm going to use Jefferson's playing on that record to kind of illustrate the tips that I want to explain in today's video. So let's get into it. So my first tip is probably the easiest one to incorporate regardless of where you are on your journey on the guitar, and that's all about just adding some variation to the notes that you play. There's a million different ways to play any given note. You can play soft, you can play hard, you can add vibrato, you can change the length of notes, whether you sustain them or play them quicker in a more staccato style. That is something that makes lead guitarists, you know, guitar solos, guitar riffs, that's what makes them inherently interesting and listenable, in my opinion, is that ability to keep the listener on their toes. If all of your notes are, you know, the same duration, played at the same velocity, then it's very hard to add that interest. So just think about adapting the way that you play any given note. Take a very simple phrase, a simple pattern, and just see how many ways you can explore approaching those notes. And I think you'll be surprised at how much of a difference that makes. So that track in the intro was in D mixolydian. It's basically a major scale with the flat 7. So we've got the major scale for D major. Once you get to that 7th note, you're just going to flatten it by a semitone. That's your flat 7. So it's this scale. So let's take a very simple pattern to demonstrate this variety that we can add and how you can start exploring it. So let's just take these simple notes here from the scale. And then just see how many ways you can approach those notes and how many inflections you can add to it. So we could start simple. Things like vibrato and string bending are all things that should be done intentionally and aren't things that should be done all the time. I think when you're just starting out, these things can be kind of crutches that we lean on because in our minds we've been programmed to associate those types of techniques with, you know, great iconic guitar players. But you'll also see from, you know, a lot of session guitarists that they're not necessarily adding vibrato to every single note and they're not sort of bending every single string. They're being a little bit more tasteful and a bit more intentional. And I think that's something to at least experiment with and keep in mind. My second tip is to stop thinking purely in scales and start thinking about chords. If you come from a rock or a blues background, then we've had the minor pentatonic scale drilled into us from day one. And don't get me wrong, I'm such a big fan of that scale. It's so universally applicable in those genres, and you can get an awful lot of mileage out of that scale, and you don't even really need to think too much about the chords underneath to start playing musically utilizing that scale. But when you start exploring other avenues of music, and when you start thinking about your lead guitar playing about becoming more melodic and incorporating a bit more harmony, then you're going to want to be a little bit more intentional with your note selection. Now, in the solo that I played at the start of this video, as the chords were going around, I was trying to incorporate some of the chord tones into those changes as the chords were cycling. So in the B section of the progression at the start, we went to A minor, to G, to D. So we're still in D major, we're still thinking about D mixolydian for this progression. But when you get to the A minor and to the G chord, I was just looking to highlight some of those changes. So for the A minor, I chose to outline this shape of an A minor chord, and I took my A minor triad here. So I was playing in D major, so let's just again use that same scale that I was just using in the example earlier. Next we've got G, so you could play something using the triad here for G major. So let's do that again. And then it was D was the last chord, so I've just again highlighted this D major chord here. And I've just highlighted my fifth, so that's the fifth interval of the D major scale, and the major third. So all I'm thinking about is chord tones. So let's play that whole passage, and you should be able to hear the chords change underneath my playing. A really easy hack that just makes your playing more musical. Now it's good to then take each of those chords and just know those triads in a few different places. So A minor, you can play here, you can play here, you can play here, you can play here. And all that does is it gives you options. Same for G, we can play G here. We can play G here. We can play G here. So let's do the same again. Let's just play those three chords, A minor, G, and D, and let's just mix up where we play the triads, and you'll hear that it just adds that musicality to your lead playing. So just target your notes, think about your root, your major third, and your fifth of each of those chords, and you'll start playing more musically, really, really quickly. This also adds way more variety into your playing, because a thing that makes, I think, lead guitarists sound more harmonically rich and sophisticated is when they actually start incorporating chords into their lead playing. So yes, you can think about chords in terms of the notes, but you can actually play groups of notes together within your lead phrases to add that level of richness. So when you're playing in your scale, let's do an example like this. Again, taking those same triads, but just kind of making the chords ring out over the lead lines. The beauty of this tip is that you're not necessarily playing the entirety of all of these chords, you're just playing a few notes, maybe even 2 or 3 notes from each chord, but just targeting those intervals within the chords while still thinking about the general scale that the song is in, whether it's, you know, a major pentatonic or a minor pentatonic, depending on whether the song is major or minor, will immediately take your guitar playing into a much more melodic place. So this final tip is probably the hardest one to explain, but do stick with me. But it's something that I like to refer to as character. It's kind of playing with character and having your own sort of unique stamp and your own fingerprint on your own guitar playing, because that's the thing that differentiates guitar players from one another. Now, we already mentioned in the first tip that there are multiple different ways to approach playing any given note on the guitar, but the thing that really struck me from that Sarah Jarosz record that I referenced earlier is that the guitar player on that particular record was just clearly having such a great time. His playing feels so free with those kind of like exaggerated bends that aren't too worried about, you know, specific pitches. It's the variation in bends. It's kind of like bending up to a note in a slightly unpredictable way. Those are all the things that I define as character. They're the unpredictable things. They're the things that really kind of are unique to that guitar player, that aren't easily replicated because it's just so inherent to the way that they approach the guitar. In tip 1, we mentioned, you know, experimenting with adding vibrato or bending up to a string. But this is where you can really start to have fun with how you add vibrato and how much you bend a string. There's things like microtonal bends, which is where you're sort of incrementally bending a string between pitches to, you know, mimic more of a kind of singer-like quality where the notes are less defined, but it's that idea of feel, I suppose. You know, adding that inflection to your playing immediately makes it seem like you have great feel and great touch. It's that liquidity and that fluidity in your sound. And it's the same with vibrato. You know, you can add vibrato slowly, you can add vibrato quickly, but it's important to just have fun with it. That's what's going to make your guitar playing feel very characterful. And it's just something that I think is overlooked. We all get taught how to play a scale or how to do like a tone bend or a semitone bend, but the number of creative choices that you can make with your vibrato and with your string bending is just something that's rarely discussed. There's so much music within the nuance of bending a string and adding vibrato that it's very, very worthwhile exploring that. So these are the types of characterful bends and microtonal inflections that I'm talking about to just add that level of flair and individuality to your playing. So if you take, let's take the same scale position that we've been using, D Mixolydian, right? Let's just start experimenting with just different ways to add that quick bend, that quick inflection. So there was no real kind of uniformity to those bends. Some were short, some were longer, some were bending just a semitone, others were just adding that inflection. It's like it's not even thinking about a note, it's just adding that level of feel and flair. So just a few concepts there to have a look at, but there are, of course, a million tips that I could give you on how to elevate your lead guitar playing. So this is by no means the end, but this is a good starting point. So if you did find this video helpful, do make sure to give it a thumbs up and leave a comment down below and let me know what you think of these tips. And if you have any of your own that have helped you in your journey as a lead guitar player, then do share it with everyone down in the comments. If you haven't already, do consider hitting the subscribe button and ring the bell to get notified of when new videos go live. I post videos on this channel every single week, so if you're enthusiastic about the guitar, then consider subscribing and come along for the next one. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.